Hey everyone, thank you for joining. This is John Hansbrough. I work with the LBL group. We do employee benefits, but part of the stuff that we're dealing with is helping companies and groups understand how to work from home and handle a lot of things from home. We've been talking in the past couple of weeks about different facets of that, if it's mental health, if it's things like, how to do a virtual estate planning and stuff like that. I wanted to bring on a really good friend of mine, Josh Church. I know Josh from growing up in San Diego. We went to the same high school, actually. We've reconnected since Josh lived for a time in Los Angeles. And Josh is a really cool dude. He is a business coach. So he works with high impact coaching where he works with high achievers, right? So if it's executives, self-employed individuals, who have you, he's trying to help them identify and create visions and put into place plans to live their best lives, both professionally and personally. He's a pretty diverse, interested kind of person. So Josh, I saw from your background, you're a writer, speaker, photographer, engineer, and coach, right? And your tagline is you're helping ambitious people play at a higher level. Can you talk a little bit about just like, how that came about? How did you get so many different interests and what that's been like for you?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me too. Stoked to be here. I've always considered myself a passionately curious student of life. So I really believe that we can learn from everything around us, whether it's a conversation with an Uber driver, conversations like this, books, like all the different history, mentors. There's so much to learn from everything and everyone around us, like butterflies, caterpillars and butterflies. Like the fact that caterpillars actually cocoon and turn into butterflies always blows my mind. And like things like that. There's so much to learn from just literally everything around. And so ever since I was young, I kind of like, my parents told me I was very in touch with that kind of, that sense of wonder a little bit. And I was able to and love still tapping back into that. And I bring that professionally and personally into everything that I do. So it's kind of like a mixture of things. Whenever somebody asks, what do you do? The immediate question that I ask them is, well, do you want to go grab a cup of coffee and sit down and chat about it? Because I can't give you quite a one-liner right now on what it is that I do. And it's pretty interesting because I think we associate so much of our value in what we do. Maybe specifically in the Western world, but it's just part of it. What do you do? I prefer questions like, what are you passionate about? What are you working on right now? What's going on at the moment? What projects are you into? Because I feel it's a lot more kind of expansive and long-term than just like, oh, I do this. I'm bucketed into this kind of category. So I love kind of exploring those different things. I've been fortunate to have some pretty amazing experiences across the board, and from teaching to different adventure trips and photography, and just kind of following those passions in different ways and all tying that all in together, and how I'm able to show up and serve other people to provide value in a number of different ways.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, like right there, that was something I talked about a couple of weeks ago with some people. We had a mental health roundtable conversation with a psychologist and a family medicine practitioner. And we actually talked a little bit about that identity and how identity is kind of, it's majorly disrupted right now. So, whether that is being out and about in some kind of sports way, right? I have that. I'm not playing sports on the weekend right now. But for a lot of people, we have professional identities, and those are so key to how we view ourselves and where we're drawing a lot of positive thoughts about ourselves and all that, and how that has such a major impact on our life, right? And so you have people who aren't going into the office, so they're not, maybe the manager in the office or the team member. They're literally not putting on the suit, right? So you're not putting on your uniform. You're not putting on your outfit. That's kind of having that mental transition for you. And so, today we're going to talk about working from home. How do you hack that, right? And I love that term, and I think that's something that we've connected on before, is that we both have a similar mindset for that. We come into some situation and we try to think, okay, how can I pull this apart and kind of get to a foundational, like, how can I ask some foundational questions about what I'm doing and how can I be successful at it? And then build some kind of strategy from the ground up to handle that effectively, efficiently, and something that can be, repeated into the future, right? So it's not just a one-time fix. We want to hack. We want to figure out how we can do this better and better in times forward. So working from home, it's not easy, right? I think we've all figured that out. You've been doing that though for a while, right? Yeah. You've been working from home and you've had to already adjust to this way before most people did as a result of COVID. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I, just a brief background that sets the stage for that. So when I was in my second year in college, I went to school at Miami of Ohio, outside of Cincinnati. So actually my third year in college, so started my junior year, I went to San Francisco to do this internship program where you go out to San Francisco, find an internship, work full time, at a company doing an internship, and you can transfer credits back. So I went for a semester. I got hooked up with this awesome startup company that was like in stealth mode at the time, like total Silicon Valley. They had raised about $150 million. I was the first person on the marketing team, and just kind of like learning from some amazing people. We had investors, like people coming through the office, like Tony Robbins and Oprah and Kobe, RIP, coming through the office all the time. And it was like so cool as this, like, you know, college kid just learning from all these amazing people. And when it came time for me to go back to school, I got a full-time offer from the company. They were like, hey, we're about to launch in March. You should stick around. So I'm like, okay, I'll stick around. So I delayed. And I ended up actually never going back to school. I was able to finish online, and I worked for that company for the next year. And that was in a startup environment. I was still work from home though, because I moved down to LA from San Francisco to open up the LA office. That's how I landed in LA. And I was still work from home. So right from that get-go, and I only stayed there for another 6 months or so before I had the existential crisis and quit my job and did what any responsible young early 20 kid does, and bought a one-way ticket to Thailand and got a backpack and backpacked around for like 8 months, you know, that whole thing. So, but ever since then, and then I came back and I got into education, and that's how I ended up discovering this coaching world, and partnered up with a guy who was growing his coaching business and wanted some support with that. And that was 3 years ago. And we've been able to grow the company from just him and I with about 10, 15 clients to a team of 13 employees with 115 clients worldwide, which is really exciting. So that's kind of the background that I bring. But I was always working remote from a very young age. I did get that stint of like coming into the office, which I really did like. And I found very quickly, it's not for everybody. And I had to really step up my discipline to ensure that I was doing it. I was staying productive and doing it in a way that really was effective. I got to know myself a lot through that process. It kind of forced me down this rabbit hole of learning a lot about productivity, like you're talking about hacking, optimizing things. How can I be more efficient? How can I work smarter, not harder? And it provides a lot of freedom, but on the other side of that freedom is a lot of responsibility as well. So it's important understanding that you have a lot of freedom, and a lot of people focus on the freedom that you get working from home, but you forget about the responsibility. With responsibility comes freedom. So that's, I've been working from home for a while. So I've, figured out some of these little hacks and whatnot to really, it's all about setting yourself up for success, as I'm sure we'll dig into here.
Right. Yeah. And usually just when we are going into an office, there's so many environmental cues, I think, is the biggest thing that I've noticed for myself working from home. I already worked from home a little bit before COVID, but now I'm not going into the office 3 to 4 times a week like I maybe was before now. And so there's all those environmental cues, like you said, putting on the suit, putting on the clothes, getting in the car, doing your usual commute. Like there's so many of those routine kind of things.
Yep.
They talk about with athletes, right? You hear about athletes who have some weird kind of ritual, right? So maybe they're going to put on their left sock before their right sock, their, left sleeve before their right sleeve. They have some kind of ritual. And part of that is it's all those cues, right?
Yep.
It's like it's getting yourself into a state of flow, right? And all of those things, it's that repetition, it's conditioning your mind, right? It's a very Pavlovian kind of response probably, where you're thinking, okay, I'm doing this, so therefore I'm about to be doing, this other thing. And that's getting you ready for it. So when we are working from home, there's not that start of the day and end of the day for work, right? It's when I open my laptop up and maybe when I close it or I get off the phone finally. Some people I've heard are actually working in some ways more because that's not stopping, right? They're opening up their email when they wake up and they're having coffee and they're walking the dog, and it's 7 o'clock at night all of a sudden, and they're still sending emails out and they're texting with coworkers or clients. What do you think is an effective way for people to reinstitute some of those boundaries so they can be really effective in that time frame when they are working and when they're not working? How do you think you create a better boundary there for yourself?
It's a great question. You have to it's your responsibility to create those rituals and routines. You have to, look, even if you're not working from home and you're going into the office, the modern day workforce is so different than what it once was. The whole 9 to 5 concept came from factories, right? You go into the factory 9 to 5, you clock in, you clock out. And in the past, you would go into the office, you would do your work, and you would come home and you would leave work at home. We don't leave work at home, regardless if you even work in an office, because we've got these things, right? We've got our, push notifications blowing up. We got our emails. We're plugged in 24/7, literally. What's the first thing that most people do when we wake up? Right? Roll over, snooze the alarm maybe, and then start scrolling through. I've 100% been there, and I still do that sometimes. So there's that. And then the last thing you do before you go to bed, it's like plugged in, outside world coming in, outside world coming in. So I found it super important to create those boundaries for yourself. It starts with the alarm in the morning and it ends with what I call as my reverse alarm. So like I actually institute like the more that I can force myself within those boundaries, and sure there's exceptions here and there, but the more that I can force myself in those boundaries using my calendar is super important to have my like what I call calibration time in the morning to get up, get myself in alignment, get myself ready and prepared for the day and whatever that means for me. And then I start my work at a certain time when I have my 7:30 standing call with my team. And then I will unplug at a certain time, or sometimes earlier if I'm finished the work. That's the freedom that you can, that you can afford if you're on top of your stuff. But unplug at a certain time, and I literally have a reverse alarm that goes off on my phone when it comes down to wind down time at 9 o'clock. It goes off. I put my phone in airplane mode, and I put it away, and then I don't take it off airplane mode until I'm ready to in the morning. So I can get my energy right and I can be proactive versus being reactive, because when we're living in a state of continuously being plugged in, we're reactive to everything. And then you're just allowing what's going on, the outside world, the media, the current events, Instagram, social media, work, emails, your boss to affect you before you can actually dictate how you're going to bring your energy towards that. And that's not effective for anybody, nor is that responsible in my opinion, right? You got to be on your game. You got to be in your zone. You don't just jump right into the game. You got to do your warm up first. You got to get ready. You got to get loose. You got to plug in. And then when game's over, you got to unplug. You got to cool down. You got to take the plug off so that you can stay sharp for that time that you are working.
Totally. Yeah. I think there's a lot there, right? So, I mean, just an example, right? Earlier in quarantine, we all watched The Last Dance, right? The Michael Jordan documentary. Yeah. He's so known for being this like highly intense competitor who will just rip his opponents to shreds, and he'll find any opportunity to get an advantage. But then he gets on the team bus and he's still cracking jokes with everyone, right? He does drop that competitive, mindset. He does drop that at a certain point because you have to, right? It's only natural. So in your guys' coaching practice so far, with what's going on right now, it's going to be really anecdotal, right? You're not doing studies. You don't have a bunch of data on this. So it's really based on your own conversations with clients. Are you finding that they're handling working from home well? What are you hearing from people as you're talking to them with what's going on for themselves professionally?
Yeah, it's challenging, and it can be challenging. A lot of it depends on, what your, where you're at in life and just generally your circumstances in a lot of different ways. So, some of my clients, was just off the phone before this with the client. She's got 3 kids under the age of 5 at home, and she's at home working to run, trying to run her business at the same time of taking care of kids and all different things. So it's very difficult for her to make those boundaries and find those times, right? This is all, again, like this is me talking as someone in my, my late 20s that's like that lives by myself, that has my space, that can really create that. But the other thing that's really inspiring is seeing those people who have like the 3 kids under 5, or that are in pretty extenuating circumstances, that still are able to make that a priority and make themselves a priority and get up a little bit earlier so that they can do their morning routine, so they can show up for their kids better. So those are the people that inspire me, to be honest, that show me that like, okay, it's possible regardless of your situation, regardless of your circumstance, it's still possible to thrive. It just comes down to your mindset and how committed you are to it and why. That's the big thing. It's like, why are you committed to this in the first place? Like, why does this even matter? You have to have some deeper drive or some deeper vision or some deeper purpose that's pulling you towards this. Because when you know your why, the how is totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter how, you're just going to do it. So those are a couple thoughts around that, but it can be very challenging for people. But when there's challenge, there's also opportunity to overcome challenge. So I think that's what we're seeing a lot in our world right now. There's a lot of challenges, but there's a lot of opportunities because of those challenges. So that's kind of the more glass half full version of the way I'm looking at the state of the world right now.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like that classic, like one of my favorite quotes out there is the Marcus Aurelius quote, right? The obstacle is the opportunity. So whatever's that obstacle, everyone's dealing with it, right?
Totally.
And so that's some bottleneck that a lot of your market, a lot of your peers are running into. And so you have to think, if everyone's struggling to do something, if you can figure out how to be successful in doing it, that's a differentiator. And so working from home, like it's one of the things that comes to mind, right, is people, if they're chasing, maybe they don't have a really great why at work, if it's not, solving some major problem or delivering something for society, if it's more about chasing prestige, no one sees you in the corner office right now. You're not driving the car around. You're not going out to those fancy business lunches. You're not doing all of those kind of common like measurements of success, right? That's not tied to an actual deeper vision and why for yourself. So I'm interested to see if you're going to see over time people reconnect to those, right? Because that's going to be more of a thing. If you're just putting your sweatshirt on, or you're putting, maybe, you know, you put on a collared shirt like this, right? You got to connect a little bit more to why you're doing what you're doing. Absolutely. Because a lot of the ornaments around it aren't there right now. So one thing I wanted to dive into a little bit with you, because I think you've got some practice doing this. We're paying a little bit more attention, I feel like now, to our online brand, because again, we're not in the office. We're not presenting ourselves physically. We're not presenting ourselves virtually, either for clients, with peers, with our management, who have you, right? How can you talk a little bit about that? Like, you know, it's new for a lot of people to think about their online brand. How important is it, and what should they be thinking about as they're kind of starting to consider it for the first time, maybe ever?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, you know, I kind of wrestle with this a bunch too, because it comes down to like, I mean, your online brand is a tool. And the question is, what do you want to use that tool for? Like, what's the objective here? What's the purpose here? So some people, for their online brand, like, it might just be an authentic outlet of expression for themselves, which comes at a certain cost if you're connecting with C-suite executives in your work that you're doing, and you need to show up in some sort of professional way. The thing to me that I find that I always resonate with and relate to is authenticity. Like, authenticity is the purest way to connect with someone. Everybody relates to and connects with authenticity. So I almost, the advice I give is like, don't try to create, if you try to create this persona or this online brand so much, it might actually do the opposite effect of what you're looking to do or wanting to achieve. And again, it totally depends on, like I mentioned before, what it is your goal is, what you want to achieve. And, you know, for me, for example, the online brand or presence that I have is one of self-expression. It's one of wanting to add value to others. It's an outlet for myself as well, to present myself in a way that doesn't limit me professionally as well, but also can help me connect with friends and family and people the way that I want to use it. So like, that's why I use it. So it totally depends on why you want to use it. But I think that's probably the best advice I would give, is identify, because I think a lot of people don't identify, like, what is this tool being used for? What's the purpose of this? And so they might try to do different things or come across as a certain way, but if you don't know why, then it's just you're going to be no man's land, making noise, and it doesn't actually relate or connect to anybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, especially like our generation, we've been doing this since people had MySpace, since they first got on Facebook, since they first got on Instagram. You're thinking about, what does this profile picture say of me? What does this post say about me? All that kind of stuff. And that, I think, again, it's not creating something out of thin air, but we've always had a professional online, or just a professional brand in general, that I don't think a lot of people necessarily took very seriously or even really thought about existing, right? So if you're someone like, you know, I've got a friend, he takes pictures of the beach in West Los Angeles, and that's his whole thing. Like, he's got an entire program around, like an entire profile around that. That's a brand, right? And totally. That's a thing for him to kind of think about professionally. And so for a lot of younger professionals, they've got maybe that framework for already thinking about, they've got a filter for how they're deciding what to put online, how they're putting it out there, how they're presenting themselves. Their brand is so valuable, right? What have you seen with people, how they've kind of maybe come around on that? They've realized that their professional brand is in some ways an asset, right? Especially if we don't have a house, you maybe don't have certain financial assets yet.
Right.
You do have a professional brand.
Yeah.
There's an asset there, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always bring this back to, when you think about that as an asset, it 100% is. So something that I love, right? Physics, we'll talk physics for a second here. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's just transferred, right? So all it is energy is just transferred in different ways. So the way that I take that, and the way that I really believe that, is whatever my income goals are, whatever I'm going to make eventually one day, whatever different assets I will have, I have them currently. They're just in different forms. They're in different, the value is there. The assets are in different forms. It's in the form of the experiences that I'm getting right now. It's in the form of the education, of the learning, of the books that I'm reading, of the brand that I'm building, if you take it that way, right? That asset as well. And all that, you know, earning an income is, in my opinion, it's just translating that value into different ways, into some sort of service offering. So right there is 100% right. It might not be like, there's a lot of value in that. I was just talking to a kid who's who's got, he's got an amazing Twitter following, an amazing social media following, has sent, multiple videos viral and very plugged into that kind of world. And you got to think about the long game. And I was urging him to think about the long game. He's like, I just want to be making, earning income from my, for my following and for my brand. And I urged him to think about like 10 years down the line from now. How easily is that going to happen 10 years down the line from now? Yeah, it's not going to happen next month, but it's that continued practice. It's building on that asset that then you will slowly translate into other areas of value that you want in your life. So it's 100%, like you mentioned, I think it's absolutely an asset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess to that point, we're here talking about hacking things, hacking COVID-19, hacking working from home. Let's talk about that, for example. How do you hack a personal brand? How do you hack a professional brand? What would be like a framework for someone who's what questions should they ask themselves as they're starting to reevaluate how and why they're putting things out there about themselves personally and professionally? What would be that framework for how we're constructing our own brand?
Yeah. What's the end goal is the first thing that I think about. What's the end goal? Is my end goal to be earning 10K a month of recurring subscriptions from some service I'm providing through the community that I've built? Is my goal to just amass a community right now so that I can do something with? Is my goal just to have this as an outlet of expression? So first and foremost, it's like, what's the end goal here? Why do you want to use this tool? Like we talked about earlier. So I think that's the first step. And I think it's about, we know this as consumers, it's like we're both consumers and creators, and most of us really just consume. Fewer of us actually create. But think about the type of content you consume. And the way that I think about it is like, I go towards and I follow certain people, or I invest in certain brands because there's something that I know I'm going to get from them. That's consistency. So there is definitely an element of consistency that you want to exude if your goal is to build a following and have a specific end goal. So it really comes down to like, what do you want people to come to you for? Like for me, for example, I want people to come to me or follow me so that they can get a bump of positivity in their newsfeed. They can get a shifting their perspective a little bit. They can think about a problem differently through me sharing my experiences, through me sharing a story, through telling a story. I want to give people a little bit of a break from everything else going on and give them a little bit of space. So that's the brand that, if you will, that I want to exude and the value that I want to provide. So that's the next step is, what do you want people coming to you for? What value do you want to provide? What value do you want to offer to the marketplace, to the interwebs, to the Instagram world? What value do you want to exude? What value do you want to give? Because through giving that value, you open yourself up to receiving value in the form of income, in the form of connections, in the form of followers, in the form of potential income down the line.
I love that. Yeah. So we think about that, for ourselves professionally, because, you're trying to think about who are you trying to talk to?
Right.
What do you want to be saying to them? What do you want them to think about you? It's the same way. I always tell the story early in my professional career. I was able to make a connection with a young entrepreneur out here in Santa Monica. And, I was all excited. I was ready to go in, talk, financial planning and stuff like that. And I walk into this office, they're playing Biggie. Everyone's on MacBooks. They're all wearing V-neck, just like, white tees. And I walk in a full suit. And I mean, it felt just like the proverbial, just the music scratched to a stop and everyone just turned and looked at me all at once. And I realized, oh my God, I totally didn't think about what my brand was going to look like in this environment.
Good point.
And so ever after, I always thought about that. It's, when you're physically in person, right? I was thinking, am I wearing a jacket and no tie? How am I presenting myself and what's that saying about me? And so I think for us now, because we're so much more virtually, our presence is now virtual, we're having to think about that maybe in different ways. And again, I think there's an advantage probably for us in the younger generation, because like we said, we were thinking about that when we were, 10 years old, even on different messaging apps and stuff like that. So we've had muscles essentially being developed for how to do this. So if someone's maybe not from that, like you talked about, thinking about your why, starting with the end in mind, right? Classic Covey, right? Yeah. Start with the end in mind. Think about yourself internally before you think about others. We're now doing a lot just like this. We're on Zoom, right? We're already using a little bit of Zoom, but like we find in any kind of major disruptive event like this, small trends that had a little bit of a beginning, they just explode in popularity. And so that's, I think, where we find Zoom now. Zoom it's a Kleenex, it's a Xerox now, right? It's a verb. So in that sense, and we were talking about this even ahead of our call, what do you think people should be aware of? What are best practices for creating an online presence through Zoom or video calls? What's the right way for them to be asking questions about themselves and looking at themselves and being reflective?
Super important. And again, I've had the advantage of, I've been on Zoom for 3 years plus now. Before anybody really knew Zoom, what Zoom was, I was conducting meetings with Zoom, and because I have some clients that I work with that are in Australia or Spain or, Africa even, right? And so I have relationships built with some people that have purely been through, I have not met some of my clients. I've not met some of my team members in real life, which is crazy to think about, but this is the world that we live in. And it's always so funny when you finally meet people that you have the Zoom relationship with, and you're like, whoa, you're a lot taller than I thought. Or like, wow, like I didn't realize that you were that short, right? It's just funny things that you find for whatever reason. So it is a really, really interesting thing. And it's important. I think the first thing is being present and is really important. It's so easy. It's when you're in person, you're forced to be present, right? You can't just be there on your phone, or like if you're sitting across from someone, we're having this conversation, like behind my Zoom screen right now, I've got a full screen, but a minimum, if I like put it back, I've got my email behind me. I've got Facebook. I've got my notes. Now I have access to the entire web right here, which is super easy to get distracted. So first thing is like, I've turned off on my computer all the notifications, silence all those notifications, put it on do not disturb mode, go full screen. Whenever you're Zooming with someone, go full screen so that it's like, this is a full screen. You're not tempted to do anything else. You're not thinking anything else. Giving someone that gift of presence it's the biggest gift you can give, especially on Zoom, and it comes across. And being conscientious of when you're talking, and when you're not talking, putting yourself on mute, like little things like that go a long way. Putting your video on, I don't know, it depends on different climates, but anytime I'm on Zoom, I always like to have my video on to show people that I'm here, I'm with you. That goes a long way as well, because when you just have everybody with their videos off, you can't connect with that. And when your video's off, then you've got your cop out to do whatever else you want on your computer. So really I think it just comes down to being really present and thinking about giving the same level of presence towards the people on your screen that you would in real life, which takes some practice to do, but it's a little mindset shift. It's like, if John was sitting across from me right now, this is the energy level I'd be speaking at. This is the presence that I would be giving you. This is this is as I aim to see you as much in real life as possible. So I think that's even just a little shift that might be helpful for some people.
Got it. Yeah. And then, can we talk a little bit even just from like a tools and hardware standpoint? Like, cause I find that, right? Like, we were talking again, thought about, okay, where am I sitting in my room? How am I presenting myself? What's behind me, right? Like I definitely spent some time working on that bookshelf, all that kind of stuff. What do people need to be aware of just from a alignment standpoint?
Totally. Well, look, it's aligned with your brand, right? I see the Game of Thrones there. I see the whiteboard, the books on your bookshelf, the guitar, the plants, the paintings. It tells me something about you as well. I'm in my parents' house right now, so you can see this is not my bookshelf quite yet, but it's a beautiful bookshelf behind here. It almost looks like one of those fake Zoom backdrops, right? But I come down here into this room for when I'm doing Zoom video calls as well, because it's different than I'm just sitting on a couch. You deliver some sort of branding or some sort of professionality with it. You should have a background that's not terribly busy, that's steady, not people moving around in the background that can be distracting. So the background definitely matters. The other thing that really matters is lighting as well. So we were both showing earlier, but I've got this little thing on Amazon. You get them for like $30. I don't know. They're just a ring light that you have that makes a big difference. If I turn this off here, see how I'm like half my face is in the shadow, right? It's not terrible, but the difference between this and this, it changes things a bit. It adds a different level. Microphones, I know we were trying to get the mic working earlier, but having a microphone, I got one on order from Amazon right now as I'm getting into my new spot, but having a good audio quality, all these little things matter. Another big thing that you find people doing that's actually really important is making sure that your camera is at eye level, right? It's funny, but like if I had my computer on my lap and it was like, right, if I put my computer on my lap right now and it's like this is just like, it's a little weird, right? It's a little bit different. It's a little bit less professional. The computer's bouncing around. Or if my computer was like up too much like this, and I'm looking up or off to the side on a monitor and I'm looking over here. So, having either a webcam that you like on the screen or just, having it standard kind of eye level, shoulder up, nice frame. This is where my photography mind comes in. It's like, you see how I'm centered between these two pillars and I like to have that straight line up there. A little bit OCD, right? But all these little things matter, and they they can help you, and depending on whatever it is you're doing. It's like the doctor wearing a doctor's coat and bumping that credibility. It's part of your image. It literally is your image.
Yeah. Well, you kind of think, if I'm at a doctor's office, you know, we're seeing that, right? Doctors are spending more time just from a timing standpoint. They're spending more time in front of a computer, typing things into your file, right, for the electronic medical records. They're not as much facing you eye to eye, sitting with you. Again, like you mentioned, even that leveling is a huge difference, right? There's just the stupid lizard part of our brains thinks about, if someone's above us or below us, it changes dynamics of the relationship. Right. So if we can be on eye level, looking at them, and I had that early in Zoom. We were doing some internal calls, and, you know, I was like eating breakfast late, and I'm sitting here just like stuffing my face. That's an issue, right? Because I wouldn't do that in person. If I was sitting in someone's office just having a one-on-one with them, I'm not stuffing my face with a burrito. That's rude. It's not something you do in person. So why, you know, initially you maybe have that feeling on Zoom. But on the other hand, I think another, like the opposite end of the spectrum is trying to be a little, it doesn't make sense, a little too put together and perfect on video probably can give people some anxiety. And it's also not really you, right? You got to be, like you said, you want to be authentic. So you got to have a little, you know, I hate it when my dog barks in the background, but a lot of times people who I'm talking to, their dogs are behind the screen too.
Right.
So they've got all these similar things going on. You know, a kid comes into the room. That's okay. You're a human being. You know, we're talking about all this stuff, and that's fine. You know, Absolutely. So I think there's probably a balance there, right?
100%. It's a great point. It's a great point. Authenticity comes through. That's the bottom line there. That's a big takeaway.
Yeah. Awesome. So we talked a little bit about online tools with Zoom. Are there other online tools that you find that you've been using a lot while you've been working from home, just in your professional career, that people might be a little slow to know about or be picking up just yet?
Yeah. So again, calendar and reminders on my Mac are the saving grace for me. I outsource and offboard so much mental chatter and things that I would hold on to in my mind, with a solid to-do system, a solid, which I call my get to do system. It's a little mindset shift, everything we get to do, with my get to do system, with notes, with calendar and reminders. So that's kind of the standard that I feel like a lot of people are on and using. But the biggest shift that I've seen personally for me is taking control back of my computer and my phone and making it a tool for me using it as a tool versus it using me. And it's just really important to remember this. This is fascinating when I learned this, but Facebook hired, a few years ago, they hired like the top 10 neuroscientists in the world to help make their platform more addictive, right? Because the way that they operate is the more people spend the more time on there, the more money there's to be made. And that's not to say it's a bad thing at all. It's an amazing tool. Like no shade on that at all. Like I get it, but it's just important to understand what people's incentives are so that you can use it how you want. Like, you know how we swipe down to refresh on the timeline, right? You know how you pull your finger down and you swipe? You know where we got that from?
Yeah.
Slot machines. I came from some consultants from the gambling industry with the slot machines, right? The instant gratification, the pull down, the red notifications that you see on your phone or your screen. It gives us a hit of dopamine that makes us that makes us feel something. So like even right now, if I were to, you know, if I put my phone on, right, you see, I've been on call since 9 a.m. and there's not one notification there. There's just my phone on do not disturb mode, right? So phone is on do not disturb mode, turning off push notifications of things that you don't need. I even go as far as turning off push notifications for email. And if you're in a type of work environment where you can't do that, I understand that obviously, but if you can, do it. It'll change everything. Turn off your push notifications so that you're using it when you want to. When I go onto my phone, I'm not reacting to a notification or something. I'm going on there for a specific reason, and I'm not getting sidetracked by, you know, seeing the Instagram bubble pop up or like Messenger. I even have those red. No, you can turn all those things off. It's amazing. So taking control back of that and making it like turning it from a smartphone into a dumb phone is kind of one way to put it. There's a great article that I can share that has like different ways on how to hack your phone. And they go into deep things like what colors you should use as the background and folder app arrangements and kind of some deep things all based on psychology. I haven't gone that far. Some people have, and they really like it. But just kind of getting in that mindset of how can I use these tools instead of letting these tools use me? It changes so much.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of that on my phone is what I did. I turned the Assistive Touch. So when I hit 1, 2, 3, everything goes to a grayscale.
Ooh, I like
You
that.
see that?
That's very cool.
Because it plays into that. It plays into the colors. The colors hit you. And I started doing that. I'll do that a lot of times, maybe like 30 to 45 minutes before I go to sleep.
That's really cool.
Because like you said, it's dopamine hits. Every time you see all those colors light. And it's really interesting when you turn it off. First of all, if you're on an app like say Instagram or Facebook, when you do that, I mean, it feels suddenly like, you know, you're suddenly switching from sugar to sugar-free.
Yeah.
Like it's really weird. You can feel your brain almost respond to it. And then on the flip side, when you turn it back on, so say in the morning, I open up my phone, I like go to Outlook and I'm thinking, oh, okay, there's not the blue. Let me turn this on. You see the result. You can feel the result in your mind when you go back from that grayscale to the full
really
color.
Cool. I didn't know that.
And it's like you mentioned.
I'm doing that now. Grayscale. I like it.
Yeah. I found that out. That was I think that was a Tim Ferriss hack.
Nice.
That I heard about. It's the same point. It's how can I use this technology and not let the technology use me?
It's all about being proactive versus reactive. And if there's one takeaway, I mean, you know this from all of those books I see on the bookshelves down there, on your deep work, on your whiteboard, on your, right? It all comes down to that idea of being proactive, getting out ahead of it, and bringing yourself and the energy that you want with the intention that you want to the world every day versus allowing other people to program that for you, because that's what happens by default. We don't want to live default.
Totally. Yeah. So I want to shift on. We've got like another 10 minutes or so before we open it up for some Q&A. I think one of the last things I wanted to touch on a little bit, we talked a bit about ramping up and then ramping down for the day, but kind of when we're just talking about even just our relationship with ourselves, how should we be defining success when we're working at home, right? Because it's a different environment. And I've had that before. I get off a good call with a client and I'm not going into someone else's office and I'm talking about it or giving a high five because we, won some deal. That's not there. So how do you think we need to rethink about success for ourselves and what that means so that we're, understanding our own relationship with ourselves maybe better, because that could be an issue that we're having when we're at home right now.
Really interesting. That's a really great point. Yeah, because, virtual communication like Slack or whatever, your teams might operate on internal communication channels, like that helps, but that's different than the in-person thing. And I'm just thinking, because I haven't been in an office, like that idea of closing a deal and walking over and giving someone a high five, like that seems foreign to me. So I'm like, that's really interesting to think about. So for me, it is interesting. It comes down to, let's see, let's think about a deeper way to kind of think about this. So, defining success, like we can take this on a macro scale real quick and then we'll dive deeper into the micro, but, very few people actually take the time to define what success means towards them on a macro level. One of the most valuable exercises I ever went through was something called deathbed exercise. Seems pretty morbid, but it's this whole idea, from the Stoics, memento mori, right? This idea that we're all dying, right? It's unavoidable. It's going to happen, which can bring a lot of positivity and inspiration and light into your day to help you dictate the way you want to live your life. So it's a really great reminder, but doing this deathbed exercise of visualizing yourself on your deathbed at the end of the day and thinking about what mattered most, what are we most stoked on about this life, like in a big life level. And when you can kind of understand that and define success for yourself, like for most people, it's not about having all the money or the cars or the things like that. It is about having those relationships with yourself. It is about being in alignment and in integrity and authentically living your own life and being around people that are doing the same thing and knowing that you gave it your all. Like for me, I want to know that I did the best that I could with all that I had and that I left it all out there on the field. You know what I'm saying? And I have those rich experiences and those relationships. So I think knowing that kind of bigger macro definition of success for yourself can really help you when you're on that micro level on a day-to-day. It can just help inform that a little bit better. Like you can get to know yourself a little bit better for that, because you'll understand what you're doing things. So it comes back to that why. It's a big theme here today. Start with why, like Simon Sinek says, right? It's coming back to that. So I don't know if you have anything to add on that, but maybe we can take a level deeper.
Totally. I mean, we've done that a couple times just professionally. We've been in a classroom kind of environment with peers. And I mean, the entire class, it's a 6-month class that was built around Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Success.
That's really cool.
And the Keystone Activity is writing and presenting your own eulogy.
Wow. Beautiful.
That's really intense.
Powerful.
And, it's exactly what you say. We're not talking about what brand of tie someone wore. We're not talking about what car they had or, you know, whatever kind of stuff. We didn't talk about how many bedrooms they had in their house. It's all about the relationships. You know, someone's writing it as if it's coming from their spouse, and the spouse is talking about maybe the times they shared together, how they made them feel, and those kinds of things. Maybe the presenter that, you know, as we're writing for ourselves, maybe the presenter is one of our kids, and the kid is talking about what that person, how that person was as a father or a mother, what kind of example they set and what they did for others. And that's it. So much of that. It's what did they do for others? What kind of person were they? What kind of character did they exhibit? Because that's what we remember about people, you know? If we are remembering possessions or physical, you know, objects in the world, it's probably not a good thing necessarily for someone, right? If that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a deeper exercise. You're not going to do that over 15 minutes and a cup of coffee in the morning.
Okay.
But, I mean, like when we did that as a peer group, that was huge. It was huge. And it was also for us as people that we worked with, you got to connect with everyone on a much deeper level, because it's just different when you're sharing emails and you're talking about what's going on with the business. When you're talking about the personal stuff like that, you develop such a deeper connection with everyone, because it's like, oh my God, suddenly that makes so much more sense for me. Why maybe they're not answering their phone after 5 p.m. every single day. It's not because they're blowing me off. It's because that's when they're getting to pick their kids up from school and they're spending that time with them working on homework or something like that.
Yes.
Or they're at their kids' soccer practice, right? That kind of stuff. It makes a lot of things click.
It does. And bringing that back to like on a daily practice, something that I do every day is I set an intention for the day. And it sounds a little woo-woo, right? Or yoga. I'm a yoga teacher as well. So it seems a little like a yoga class, right? But setting an intention for the day, I think, is really important. It's like, what do you want to get out of today? And not just like, what do you want to accomplish? What are the that's most of where our minds goes. Like, where do you want to tactically accomplish? What things do you want to cross off the list? But it's how do you want to feel today? What do you want to get out of the day? What do you want to receive? And how do you want to feel at the end of the day? And that really, really helps guide that. And on a daily basis, because, you know, on a day where you might have a bunch of sales calls or meetings, it could be just really showing up and being present with everybody. If that's your intention, it doesn't matter if you close all the sales or none of the sales, like you've still met that intention or that objective, and you might not be riding those highs or lows. So it just depends on, like, ask yourself at the beginning of the day, like, what's the intention for today? Like, what do I actually want to get out of this day, this experience on a micro level?
Yeah, I think it's one thing that I'd always been interested in doing some of, and I feel like quarantine really pushed me into that, was journaling. It's super weird starting to journal because you're just talking to yourself, right? It's an audience of no one, just an audience of one with yourself. And I think it's a lot of trial and error, right? You start doing it, you start to feel it out. It's just like you're going to the gym. If you go to the gym, you have no idea which machine to get on. You have no idea what to do. But once you show up, like, you know, like half of the work is just showing up, right? Yep. And so just half of the work for me with learning how to journal was just opening it up and just writing something down, because once you write the first word, then you write the second, and it just builds on itself. And so one thing that I learned that I really liked doing was I finally got to a space where I feel like I've got a good process, which is I talk about my wins for the day. I'm projecting what wins I'm planning to have tomorrow, which is then interesting to then the next day I compare what I'd planned for a win to then what I actually did feel like I accomplished that day. And it's interesting when they don't match up, and that obviously presents opportunities to ask questions about, you know, what was going on and why did my priorities shift, and was that a good or bad thing? I started writing recently, what did I learn today? And so it's not really like a factoid, right? It's not like, well, Earth is, X planet from the sun, because I don't even know that. It's more kind of a deeper thing, or what did I think about life a little bit more today, which is, it's so esoteric and philosophical, but I feel like it's been interesting to get into. And then just what am I grateful for? Could be, I'm grateful to live in Playa Vista, California, where it's, 75, 80 degrees outside. I can walk the dog and it's great weather. Maybe I'm grateful for, developing a new opportunity to have a conversation with my significant other about something, right? You can take it down to a really base level, or you can take it up to really big topics. That's been a really helpful thing to iterate for me, because it's just, you got to have some other kind of scoreboard. And I feel like there's probably so many, right over there, that word scoreboard, there's probably some philosophical conversations we can have about the idea of this binary win and loss, right?
Oh yeah.
It doesn't really need to be a win or loss, but those kinds of things can be helpful, huh?
The score takes care of itself. That's one of the biggest shifts that I've learned. Focus on playing the game, and the score will take care of itself.
100%. So outside of some of this professional stuff, I think, I kind of bringing it full circle, we introduced you talking about all the things that you're interested in. You're not Josh Church, the business coach. You're
Right.
Josh Church, the adventurer, speaker, photographer, all these different things, right? You're a multi-hyphenate. How important do you think those have been for you developing the ability to be successful working from home because you have hobbies and interests outside of your, narrow siloed professional life, maybe that keep you curious, that keep you energized and engaged while you are working?
So important, man. So essentially important. Like, I come from one of these OG wizards and self-help books, but it's like this idea of you need 3 hobbies: one to make you money, one to keep you healthy, and one to have fun. It might be, or one to stay creative, something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's like kind of having that. I really like that, and I aim to model that as well. And when you can, something powerful happens when you can lessen the identity you might have to your work that you do, because it opens up the space for you to identify with other things that you might enjoy or want to be a part of. So that's something that's really powerful. But just from a pure kind of logical standpoint, you can only put so much into one thing. When I focus on my writing, or I focus on photography, or I'm working on another creative project, or I'm going and climbing Mount Kilimanjaro and taking off for 2 weeks to go do that thing, or I'm learning this certain training, or doing a triathlon, right? All these different things. Mm-hmm. It gives me another outlet to divert some of my energy towards. And it's kind of this like cyclical thing where it's like I put out the energy and then I get back energy from it. And if I'm just full on in work and I'm just getting energy, getting out, putting it out of it, it can be draining, right? It can be super draining. Literally, like we use those words, it's draining. I'm just putting all my energy into it. It's super draining. But all of a sudden you start diverting some of that energy as well to other things that are different side of the brain, that are just completely different, whatever it might be. And with different, like with a little bit more space, then all of a sudden you start receiving energy from those different things, and the way you show up at work is different, and you can show up at a higher level of yourself. So from a pure like energy standpoint, that's the way I like to think about it. But everything is interconnected, right? It all informs something. So something that I learned from climbing, like when I was at Mount Kilimanjaro, the big theme is pole, which means slowly. And you walk super slowly, because as you get up into thinner air and altitude up to 19,000 feet, the air gets really thin, and you have to walk slowly, or else you'll pass out. You'll outpace yourself. You'll get altitude sickness. So I was like, interesting. We're walking way slower. I could walk so much faster, but eventually that turtle pace ends up feeling really fast when you get up to the top and into thin air. And so like taking that, it's like, okay, cool. Pole, slowly. How can I bring that element? Where can I slow down to speed up in other areas of my life? How can I slow down to speed up when I'm talking or writing or in work or goals or aspirations? How can I lengthen the runway for myself? How can I give myself more time and slow down a little bit to actually speed up? So you see, it's like, it's making those kind of reference points where I don't have that reference point if I'm just focused in on work. I don't have that reference point that I get from doing this triathlon and this idea of the journey and the destination if I don't actually do this triathlon, and I don't actually fail doing this triathlon. Right? I don't think about achievement and win or loss if I'm not doing it elsewhere. So it all is really intertwined, so long as you're willing to look at it that way. So that's kind of the what I'd encourage everybody to do is give yourself permission to focus on these other things, because it's going to help you in other areas. It's all interconnected.
Right. Yeah. I think it's so huge, because if you can't be present with your family, or you can't be like highly engaged and curious in some outside pursuit, I think you're going to be less effective as a professional, Like, I hope that, when I'm working with someone, they know, wow, on the weekends, John, is, busy, doing these creative pursuits or what have you. And he's bringing that then to the table with us, because I want to know someone's engaged and productive in everything that they're working on in life. I think you're going to be out of balance. You're going to be out of sorts when you're just too, heavy in one side of your life, right? You got to have that balance.
Right. Like, I want to know that you're a savage in flag football and you tear it up on the weekends, or you hit the beach. You know what I'm saying? Like, that makes, it makes you who you are. It makes you that person. Tying back to the branding conversation, like, it makes you relatable. It gives you ways to connect deeper with people through other pursuits. It's tough to connect with someone if all they know and all they do is work. Because if you're not in that line of work, like, you can only connect on some superficial level, but it's about connecting on the other things of being a parent. It's about connecting on being an athlete, of being a college a college player, a college football player, or being anything, whatever it is, a cyclist or a runner, whatever that might be, it gives you opportunity to connect.
Yeah. So we want to go to some questions here. We got a few minutes left. So first question's from Casey Kirkby, if I'm saying that correct. Casey's question: if you could give one piece of advice on someone building a brand online through video, what would that advice be?
Nice. Be yourself. So cliche, so silly, so cliche. But in order to build a brand online through video, you have to be pumping out video consistently, and you have to be in it for the long run. You're probably learning this as well with your YouTube channel, right, John? Like, it's not like we might have this fantasy of just like, I'm going to start this YouTube channel and it's going to get all these views and things are going to go viral and all this. It's like, that's not the way it really works. You've got to be really committed to it for the long run. So you need to know why you're doing it. And you also need to make sure, when I say be you, and what I mean by that is do it in a way that energizes you, because that's what's going to keep you going, and it's what's going to keep you consistent, and that's what's going to allow you to be putting out all the content for however long it takes for you to achieve whatever result it is. So I would say be consistent, be yourself, and do it in a way that's super aligned, where it's energizing for you to keep going, regardless if nobody were to view it, or you would get one view every time. It would be your mom or your grandma, and that was the only view you got, or whatever it might be. That it's energizing for you because you're so connected to why you're doing it.
Right. Well, it's just what you said. It's get in love with the process, not the destination. Because how often have we had that we want to climb some, either proverbial mountain or literally in your shoes, an actual mountain? How often have we found that, oh my God, we get there and there's not, bells and whistles don't go off, confetti doesn't fall down from the rafters. Just we keep living life, right? So we got to fall in love with that process. Like, that was one of my favorite things of playing sports so much as a kid, is I fell in love with the process of exercising and training and trying to, again, using the term, trying to hack my athletic performance and think, okay, if I'm getting 1% better every single week or month, that builds up over time. I don't notice it immediately, right? One of the books up there, I don't know if you can see it, Atomic Habits, the James Clear book. One of my favorite pieces in that entire book is where he's got our expectations of results and then the curve that we actually experience, right? I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we think, take videos, for example. We're going to put out one video a week, and we think maybe we'll get another 2 subscribers every time we do that. After, doing that for 10 weeks, we've got 20 subscribers. That doesn't happen. That's not how it works. What actually happens, right, is we start chipping away at it. We start putting stuff out there, and it feels like nothing happens, right? We're on this very slow trend. We do it enough, we start to feel like, wow, we're hitting this plateau. Nothing's really happening. And what do they call it? The plateau of latent potential. Yeah. It's like you mentioned, there's energy, right? We're building up this energy. It's like an earthquake is releasing energy that's been built up over years or decades or centuries. In the same way, we're just putting pieces in, and then suddenly things are going to take off. But it's like the overnight success is a result of like years of practice, right? We didn't just suddenly start doing something and then we see a result. It takes some time for it to build up and develop over time. So yeah, I would say the same thing, consistency. Like, I've got myself on a schedule. I want to be interviewing interesting people who've got valuable topics to talk about every single week. I'm also putting together videos on the side, and that's it's just building away and chipping at it. It's not something that's going to happen overnight.
Playing the long game.
Yeah. Any other questions for anyone else out there before we go today? See if any other questions come in. Josh, what do you feel like? So what's your next, what's the journey you're on right now for the future destination? You got another mountain you're climbing or triathlon you're chasing after?
Yeah, both, but the triathlon might be postponed because of everything going on right now. But I'm set up to climb Mount Rainier up in Washington. Awesome. Which will be my first technical climb. So it's going to be like ice axe and crampons and things. So that'll be fun. I'm doing that with my cousin and brother this upcoming May. So in a bit from now. But for now, it's just staying healthy and just enjoying and getting into just kind of chipping away and building that base, building that foundation, and just enjoying. That's just the big thing right now, is just enjoying life right now.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, no other questions came in. So I think for everyone that tuned in, we're going to make this available on YouTube afterwards. So keep an eye out for an email from me as well. Josh, do you have any resources or any kind of takeaways for anyone that we can share with the group afterwards?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think sharing that article on, it's like a very in-depth article on like the phone hacking might be helpful of taking control of the tools. So we can definitely share that. And you can share my my Instagram at Joshua Dean Church as well for anybody that wants to follow. I put out a lot of this kind of content, talk a lot about this this stuff. So you guys would love to connect with anybody that's interested. Love connecting with people. So and yeah, but I think that's a good starting point.
Perfect. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for your time. Have a great rest of your Friday. Josh, I appreciate having you here. Keep it up, man. Talk to you soon, okay?
Great to chat. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, bye.